Hello, everybody. Welcome into GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast. I am your host, Jeremy Lapidus. Hope everybody had a great weekend. Today is Monday, May 12th. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Marab, the host of the GSMC Basketball Podcast here. We're going to be talking a lot of action together. We're going to go over the NBA Draft Lottery later on. We're going to go over the games from this weekend. We're going to talk about the Knicks. We're going to talk about the Pacers. We're going to talk about the Warriors and the Nuggets, all of that coming up in just a second. But before we do, remember, if you would like to be an even bigger part of the show than you already are, all you need to do is go to gsmcpodcast.net. Or if you're on YouTube, you can use that super chat feature. If you do either of those two things, a message should pop up on the bottom of the screen for you, me, and everybody else around the world to see. If you do have a burning question about sports, anything at all that you would like to ask, go and throw that in the comments. Throw it in the chat. I will get to it as soon as I possibly can. I appreciate everybody so much for sticking around, talking some sports with me here on a beautiful May 12th. But like I was saying, we do have Marab here. Marab, how are you doing today?
Doing awesome, Jeremy. Thank you for having me today.
Of course, anytime. But we're going to start off here our show today going over a little bit of the content from the Eastern Conference of the NBA playoffs. So we're going to start off with the New York Knicks taking on the Boston Celtics. This series has been insane. Obviously, the Knicks take Game 1 and Game 2, which led to a lot of questions specifically for Jason Tatum and that Boston Celtics team. But the Celtics, they answer big in the Garden Game 3, a game that they had to win. What does this mean for this series? And the big question for me, Marab, who's really in control here? Is it the Celtics? Is it the Knicks with that 2-1 lead? What's going on in this series right now?
Yeah, you previewed it awesomely. This is a crazy series, top down. If you're talking about depth, you can talk about the Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown effect. Your first question, absolutely. I think the Knicks are in control of the series right now. Their grit is showing immensely throughout this series. We saw them go into Boston and knock off the defending champs not once but twice, continuing their undefeated streak on the road. Now there is a little bit of a question mark though. The Knicks are now 1-3 in MSG, and the Celtics have I think they have the best road record in the NBA. It's gonna be interesting to see how this all plays out because I seriously think tonight's game, whoever wins tonight's game, I think wins the series. If the Celtics win, they make it a 2-2 series, put all the pressure back on New York, going back to Boston, reclaiming home court advantage as well. And if the Knicks win, of course, they go up 3-1, and barring a Celtics miraculous comeback, they will move on to the Eastern Conference Finals. So tonight's game is crucial for both teams.
Yeah, no, tonight's game is huge. You have to remember that in the regular season, the Celtics swept the Knicks 4-0. Now, this isn't something that we have seen be a death sentence in the playoffs. Obviously, a similar thing happened last year when the Suns swept the Wolves, and then the first round, the Wolves ended up sweeping the Suns over there. Very different set of circumstances here, but there's still a little bit of a through line. That game, to me, that Game 3, it felt like the Celtics took back control. And it's not like they didn't really have control of these series. They were up by 20 points in each of the first two games in this one, and then they just went away. They missed all their shots. They had shot 25%, 25 for 100, actually, right on the dot there, making our percentage math easy. But 25% from three for the first two games of this series, and you get the feeling that's not going to last forever, right? That's not something that we are going to see out of this Celtics team the entire series, and again, that showed up big in Game 3 in the Garden. Game 4 tonight, it's already kicked off a little bit. We're about 30 minutes into the game there, but what's the big key when we're talking about this game? Obviously, it's a must-win for both of these teams, I believe. If the Celtics even this series, the Knicks, honestly, I feel like are done in 6. I don't think they have the juice to compete with the Celtics team. Maybe I'm way off there, but if the Celtics fall 3-1, they could still come back, but it's going to be a heck of a lot harder. What's the key for the Celtics? What's the key for the Knicks in this game?
I think the key for the Knicks, let's start with the Knicks part because they're up 2-1 and they hold home court advantage. So let's start with them. I think it comes down to Jalen Brunson. we have really been missing that Jalen Brunson game in this series. I think in game 1 he had 29 points. Game 2 he had just over 20 points. He hasn't really had, even in that game 1, he wasn't an efficient 29 points. He got hot in the fourth quarter, and that's what's been the story of this series, hitting clutch shots down the stretch, and obviously being labeled as the clutch player of the NBA this year. But we haven't really seen that 40-point game, for example, in Game 6 against the Pistons. We haven't seen that explosion out of him. So I think if they can get him going early on, that would be crucial. We also saw in Game 2, Mikal Bridges turned it on late in that game in the second half. He was a big reason why the Knicks came back in Game 2 to win that game. I think they need him. Mikal Bridges is really the X factor for this team. And then, of course, you have the rest of the guys like Cat, Karl-Anthony Towns, and Josh Hart. But those two guys in particular are the two guys that I think the Knicks need to get going early on offensively.
Yeah.
For the Celtics side of things,
and Jalen Brunson, you mentioned. Jalen Brunson has been, just to put it plainly, really bad in the first 3 quarters of each of these games. He turned it on down the stretch, like you mentioned, in game 1 and 2. But if he does that again, if he does his disappearing act again, I don't think the Celtics are going to shoot their way out of a game again. But speaking of the Celtics, you were starting to get on what is the key for them. Obviously, shooting is one of them, but that's got to make your shots to win a game. What's the key for the Celtics to take game 4?
I think you know what I'm going to say, Jeremy. They need to knock down their shots. Game 1 and Game 2, they shot incredibly poorly. Game 1, they had the NBA record for most missed threes in a game. Game 3, they kind of turned it on a little bit. They shot a little bit more efficiently with 50% from 3. Sorry about that. But I think you need to get these guys, they need to make their open shots. I think it's 48 threes they've shot in this series that have been wide open, and by wide open I mean 6 feet or more between the player taking the shot and the defender. You need to hit that. You need to knock down those shots. Those are the easy ones.
Right.
So I think that's what it comes down to. I think it comes down to the play of Jason Tatum, and as well as some of those role players. We saw Peyton Pritchard go off in Game 3 with 23 points. I think it's the shooting of the Celtics that can keep them in it. As long as they can shoot the ball decently, I think they'll be fine.
And that brings us back to what I think is the big question with this series in specific. Despite the Knicks being up 2-1, in my mind, it feels like the Celtics are in charge of this series. It feels like the Celtics are the one running the show, even in the games that they lost. It was an overtime loss where they led by 20. It was a 1-point loss where they led by 20. They just kind of let the game get away from them. Am I that far off base here, Marab, for thinking that the Celtics have been and still are in control of this series regardless of what has happened thus far?
No. Seriously, no. Game 1s and Game 2, they held control of the game for 3 quarters. Each of 6 quarters, 6 out of the 8 quarters between Game 1 and Game 2, they've held the lead by 20-plus points. In Game 3, they won the game by 20-plus points. They were up by 30-plus. They hold the keys to. They hold the card. They hold the cards. They hold the cards to their own destiny, and it depends on how they shoot. If they can figure out if they can make some little coaching adjustments. For example, with Joe Mazzulla not calling timeout in overtime in Game 1, not calling timeout in Game 2 for the final possession with Jason Tatum. I think it's little adjustments, and yeah, that's all I can say really about it.
Yeah, going from little adjustments to a series that I think really needs some big adjustments. Let's talk a little bit about the Pacers here. The Indiana Pacers now up 3-1 on a team that dominated the regular season. Of course, there are still some reasons you can point to. Not having Darius Garland for Game 1 and 2, not having Evan Mobley for Game 2, not having Hunter for Game 2. They all came back in Game 3. They did what they needed to do, right? They got the guys out. They got a victory to keep this series seemingly close. But then last night happens. 80 points, a 41-point halftime deficit for the Cavs. And yes, they clawed their way back, but they also lost Donovan Mitchell at halftime. Big changes need to be made in this series as opposed to the Knicks Celtics series. Do the Cavs stand a chance at all, Marab?
I don't think so. I seriously think the health of the Cavs compromises them too much. I think, as well as Darius Garland has played, he had 21 points last night. Without Donovan Mitchell, this team is like they're like sitting ducks out there for the Indiana Pacers to pick off. And I don't mean to get on the Cleveland Cavaliers. Like you mentioned, they had the best record in the Eastern Conference. They went on to tear. They went on multiple 17-game win streaks, 15-plus game win streaks in the regular season. Multiple. They were absolutely one of the best teams in the NBA, the second best record. And to go from that, unfortunately, they just pulled a bad draw, I think, in this second round. This is a Pacers team that is so incredibly deep.
It's so deep.
That can go 7-man deep. 7-man deep that went double figures last night. You have Tyrese Halliburton that's running the show. And a little nugget of information, this is a Pacers team that went 3-1 against the Cavs in the regular season.
Right.
So I'm as much as it's shocking as what they've done, I think we're seeing the Pacers take that next step, a step that we didn't expect right now.
And getting a little bit more, obviously the Pacers got a deep run. They have that playoff experience. They've got multiple guys on that roster that have won a championship before. This is a Pacers squad that, like you said, depth is the way they win. You have 4, 5 guys coming off the bench that can beat you in just about anything in any given game. The Cavs don't really stand a chance in my mind, but how real of a threat are the Pacers? We've kind of been, and us, I'm sure, I know I am guilty of this, kind of letting the Pacers fall a little bit to the back of the mindset a little bit. But how real of a championship contender are they? They made it to the championship, the Eastern Conference championships in last year's playoffs before getting swept by the Celtics in the hardest fought series the Celtics had to go through last postseason. The Celtics look a little weaker. Do the Pacers have a real chance of coming out of the East?
I really think so. I think they're the healthiest team in the East, and that's what's proving them to be the best team, or putting them in this conversation. I seriously thought before the playoffs even started, they were the biggest threat to the Cavs or the Celtics to come out of the East. They were my dark horse pick, and they're proving that right now. They, especially with the Celtics' injuries to Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown's knee, Kristaps Porzingis, we've seen him struggle in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. And how good the Pacers look. They're on an absolute tear. They're on a roll, and their momentum is the biggest reason. Their confidence, their momentum is a big reason why they're having success right now against the Cavs and throughout these playoffs. So, no, I would not be shocked if the Pacers came out of the Eastern Conference, and I think they have a legitimate shot to do so.
Yeah. Game 5 back in Cleveland over there, I believe, is in 2 days from now. But we're going to take a quick break here. Stick around. When we come back, we're going to turn our attention to the Western Conference. A little bit of a different feel over there in the West with one tight series and then another series that's just weird all around. But we'll be right back with that here on GSMC's Down by Contact Sports Podcast.